This is Catholic Forum. I'm Bob Krebs. John Michael Talbot is a multi-platinum selling, Grammy and Dove Award winning contemporary Catholic Christian music pioneer. His music has been the soundtrack to the faith journey of millions of believers throughout the world. His new album is his 59th. It's titled Late Have I Loved You, and it was just recently released last month. He's also a best-selling and prolific author. His 37th book, The Lord's Supper, A Eucharistic Revival, was published last year, and his new book is his first autobiography, Late Have I Loved You. It was just released on Ash Wednesday. In 2019, John Michael Talbot established his Inner Room of Spirituality, an online teaching community designed to lead you into a deeper relationship with Christ and his church through the wisdom of Scripture, monasticism, community living, and the teachings of the Church Fathers. John Michael lives and leads the monastic life, which overflows into his very active ministry from Little Portion Hermitage in Arkansas, where he is the founder and general minister of the Catholic-based community, the Brothers and Sisters of Charity. I would like to welcome to Catholic Forum music legend John Michael Talbot. John Michael, thanks for taking time to be with us today on the program.
It's great to be with you. Great to be with you again.
You have a brand new autobiography and an accompanying CD out. It's titled, let's see, what is it again? Late Have I Loved You, right? Is that correct?
That's correct. Great.
And we're going to be talking about that today. But before we do, let's get into a little bit about your background. When you were very young, like 15 years old, you started your music career, right, with your brother Terry in a rock group?
Well, I started my music career when I was 8.
Wow.
So, it didn't hit national proportions until I was 15.
Mm-hmm.
But I started when I was 8. It hit national proportions when we actually formed Mason Prophet,
Mm-hmm.
which was the new country rock phenomenon. And we did I think we did 5 recordings. We ended up with Warner Brothers, and we played with just about everybody there was to play with. The way it was back then, everybody played with everybody else. That was nothing special.
Mm-hmm.
Every band played with every other band, and we all hung out together. And the good thing was I discovered that it was a rather futile way of life. It didn't bring much happiness, so I began searching into religion and philosophy at a very, very early age, and searching for answers, something more. Read about Buddhism, Hinduism, Taoism, Confucianism, the Essenes, Sufism, Greek philosophy. I was also reading the little revised standard Bible that my grandmother had given me, and the red letters were jumping out at me, as they will do. And I noticed the fact that Jesus could say so much more by saying a whole lot less than what the other great religious founders said, and they were great religious founders. But I didn't have a personal encounter with God, and I wanted that. So I began praying, God, who are you? A he, she, or an it? I didn't have a dog in the hunt, as we say in the South. So I prayed for a long, long time, and finally I had that prayer answered in the person of Jesus, an encounter with Christ. And I didn't understand theology, or I didn't understand that he died for my sins or any such thing. But I began calling myself a Christian again. I was raised a Christian, and I'd fallen away from it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was in 1971. And the band broke up, Mason Prophet. And I spent a few years kind of bouncing around, growing organic vegetables and painting houses and that kind of thing. And then my brother and I put Mason Prophet back together as a Christian band, and got involved in the early days of what back then was called the Jesus movement. Nowadays, the movie, The Jesus Revolution, is real popular, but back then we didn't call it the Jesus Revolution. It was just called the Jesus movement. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't called Christian contemporary music. It was called Jesus music. And got to meet everybody and hung out with Larry Norman and Randy Stonehill and all the folks on the West Coast. And we ended up signing with a company called Sparrow Records. Mm-hmm. I signed as a soloist and did 2 solo records with them. But I was disheartened by the disunity I found in all the different churches and fellowships and coffee houses I found across the United States. So I was searching for something more, and I began reading the early church fathers, Clement of Rome, Ignatius of Antioch, the Didache, Irenaeus, Justin Martyr, and I was shocked to discover kind of an organic, primitive expression of what today we would call the Catholic faith right there. All the essentials were right there and in the early church. Wasn't expecting to find that there. And at the same time, I was reading the life of St. Francis of Assisi and the Desert Fathers and Mothers, and I was reading about monastic saints like Benedict of Nursia, and they were all Catholic. And I didn't expect to find that either. So the saints that were living the gospel most radically, and at the same time they were really living that contemplative, beating heart of Christianity, and I was hungering for that, and I couldn't find it in the Jesus movement, and I couldn't find it in really kind of American Protestantism. Mm-hmm. So I was hungry for that. So about that time, the Lord said, John, I want you to become a Catholic. She's my first church. I love her most dearly, but she's been sick and nearly died, and I want you to become a part of her. So in 1978, I became a Catholic under a Franciscan priest that I had found and placed myself under. His name was Father Martin Walter at Alverna Retreat Center in Indianapolis, Indiana. And that takes us from age 15 to age 24.
Wow, this is quite an experience. It was almost like a roller coaster, it seems like to me.
Yeah.
But you were always searching, and that the Lord brought you to the Catholic Church. Would you say that St. Francis of Assisi was your major influence, or there are others?
Well, there were others, but Francis of Assisi was a real catalyst. He was a pivotal figure in that, and I always say that when I couldn't find anybody else to inspire me, Francis would always inspire me, and still to this day, Francis of Assisi inspires me. When I get tired of reading about Orthodox monastic saints, or when they all begin to sound kind of the same, I read about Francis and I go, oh, there he is again, that guy. I love Francis. So and I think a lot of people love Francis, whether they're Catholic or not. He has this astounding capacity to reach people wherever they are.
Right. So what happened first, John Michael? Were you called to the monastic life, or were you called to become a Catholic musician or songwriter, or did it all come at the same time?
Well, it all kind of happened at the same time. I gave up my music. I was ready to give it all up. If it weren't for Father Martin, I would have given it up. When I brought what I thought was my last record to the record company, Sparrow Records. I'm leaving a lot out. I would encourage you all to read my autobiography, Late Have I Loved You, because I tell the whole story in there. It's an easy read. It's not a long read, but I would encourage you to read it. But when I brought him this what I thought was my swan song, and it was a Catholic mass, a charismatic setting of a Catholic mass, and he said, "Well, how am I going to sell a Catholic mass to a bunch of Southern Baptists?" I said, "Billy Ray, I have no idea. That's not my job, and it's my last record anyway." So he says, "It's going to flop." I said, "Well, probably it will flop, but it's my last record. I'm getting out of this thing." So I was ready to leave music.
Mm-hmm.
And the surprise was it was the biggest record in Christian music that year. Mm. And then I followed up with another one called Come to the Quiet, which again, I went into a hermitage. I was going to disappear for 10 years. And it was a very quiet setting of the Liturgy of the Hours and just the Psalms that I was praying by myself in my hermitage. Then I would come up with Franciscan friars, and join them for Mass every day. And he said, "Well, it's too quiet. There's too much space in this music. Americans will get nervous." I said, "Well, they probably will. So, put it out." And they said, "Well, we just had a big hit. We can afford to lose some money." So they put it out, and it sold 3 times more. And that kind of became the pattern in how I made music. Was I would just go into solitude and silence, and more music would come out, and we would put it out, and it would just sell more and more and more and more, because I wasn't trying to sell more and more and more. I wasn't even trying to make music. I was trying to pray. That's all I was trying to do. Mm. And the pattern for Christian contemporary music was an artist would try to make music that was relevant and according to a particular style to reach a particular people, and then they would go on the road for 150 concerts a year. So I was breaking, unintentionally, I was breaking all the rules. Mm-hmm. And I think that's part of the paradox of it, and part of the paradox of monastic life, and part of the paradox of contemplative life, is you go into solitude and you become more effective. As part of the paradox of silence is you say more when you spend more time saying less. Mm-hmm. So it's just the way it works.
Yeah. My guest today on Catholic Forum is the legendary John Michael Talbot. And John Michael, you live at Little Portion Monastery and Hermitage, and that's in Arkansas, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
And
Northwest Arkansas.
What is your daily life like there at the monastery?
Well, for the average member, they get up like most folks at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning, and we have morning prayer at 7, and a little breakfast, then a work meeting, and then they go to work. Lunch is at noon, after noon prayer, and a little rest, and then after that, they go back to work, and then evening prayer is at 5:30, and then there's time for private prayer, and then they retire and celebrate, and then pray their compline in private, and then they get up the next day and do it again. So it's not a terribly strenuous life. Mm-hmm. We have Mass 3 times a week, twice during the week, and then of course on Sunday. Mm-hmm. So monastic life is not terribly strenuous by any stretch, but it is demanding, because you're with the same people day in and day out. Mm-hmm. And you are praying a whole lot more than what most people pray, on purpose. And there is a lot of spiritual warfare. So you don't get to run away from the people that you don't like. You have to stay with them. In a family, you fall in love with somebody, and then you have a family. Here you fall in love with Jesus, and then you end up in the same community with him. So community is very difficult for modern Americans because Duns Scotus, he was in favor of individuation, which was to see the individual as a completely unrepeatable gift, but always within the communitarian context, always. Western, and especially American Western civilization, believes in individualism, which sees the individual as more important even than the community, whether that's the family or marriage or a community like a monastery or a job or a nation. So it makes building things like communities, families, jobs, or even cultures very, very difficult.
As the founder and the general minister of your community, how is your day different from all the others?
Well, mine is very different at this point in my life because I'm allowed to spend 5 days a week in solitude. So I live as a hermit. I come up for special feast days and holy days, and then on Sundays. You're catching me right now at the end of having the flu, so I've been in forced solitude. So I spend 5 days a week down here in the Hermitage, pretty much in solitude, and that just means I pray my office in solitude, and I do all my sacred reading in solitude, and then I do my creativity in solitude. But I always try to approach each project as if it's my last project.
So let's talk about your autobiography.
Yeah.
It's called Late Have I Loved You. Why did you decide to write that book at this point in your life?
Well, 7 years ago, I had an experience in the hospital, and what occurred was I got very, very sick, and when I got so sick that it hurt to think objective thoughts. So while I was in the hospital, I wanted to praise God, but I couldn't think objective thoughts. And so all I could do was lay in the bed and kind of mumble in tongues. I'm not talking about Pentecostal tongues. All I could do was kind of go like that. And I did that for hours. And somewhere in the middle of that, I had an experience where my guardian angel grabbed me under my left arm, and I'm pretty sure the angel of death grabbed me under my right arm, and they lifted me out of my bed and out of the room and let me glimpse paradise. And as I saw paradise, I was able to experience in one flash all of my sins, all of them, like I had never experienced them before in my life. And that's overwhelming. And all of God's mercy and forgiveness of those sins in one flash, the same flash. So it all happened as one experience, not two experiences, but one experience. And it left me weeping. And when I had experienced that sufficiently, and I say sufficiently because there was no time. This was outside of time. They turned me around and brought me back to the hospital bed. and where I was mumbling in tongues. And then, of course, when I got better, they discharged me and I came back to the monastery. So for well over a year, anytime I prayed, and most especially when I went to Mass, all I could do was weep, especially during the Eucharistic prayer, the anaphora. It was just overwhelming that the reality of Jesus' presence, his whole life, especially his dying for me on a cross, his resurrection, his ascension to prepare a place for me, the gift of the Holy Spirit from the Father, that this was present fully in every Eucharist, just reduced me to weeping. And that heaven and earth there was no separation during the liturgy. And to this day, when I experience the Eucharist, there's no separation. So the Eucharist for me is overwhelming.
Why do you think God gave you this great gift?
Well, to prepare me for heaven, for one thing, to allow me, and I ended up writing "Late Have I Loved You" as a musical piece to try to give some kind of audio representation of that experience. The first three songs set it up. The last three songs are an audio icon called the Apocalypse Triptych of heavenly worship. They're a feeble attempt of trying to capture what I experienced in that flash of what I saw of heavenly worship. And then the book is an attempt. It needed to update my story anyway. And my editor said, "Look, John Michael, don't have somebody else write it this time. Why don't you write it? Do an autobiography." And the only difference is shorten it so it's an easier read. And I wanted to take out all negative references. I had a few negative references to people that I had falling outs with. And I thought, well, you don't need to mention any of that. I don't want that in the story. Take those things out.
So you think that the book and the CD are something people should experience together, correct?
Yeah. They're meant as a piece. It's the story of where I am now. And I don't know if I'm going to live a long time. In monastic spirituality, you're supposed to live every day as if you're dying today.
So how can our listeners and our viewers get the book and the CD? Would it be from your website?
Yeah, go to johnmichaeltalbot.com. And from there, you can go to the store online and you can order it there easily. And I would encourage people to also, you can check out our bakery. We have great baked goods at the monastery. Go to littleportionbakery.org. I always tell people, if you can't join the monastery, at least you can eat like a monk. And we have Viola's granola and St. Clair's breakfast cookies and St. Anthony's hermit bars. I'm not kidding you. That's the best granola on the face of the earth. I'm not kidding.
You're making me hungry.
Yeah. And also, this is a wonderful place to come and make a retreat. It's probably one of the most beautiful, undiscovered, diamonds in the rough in the American church. It really is. So check those things out, you'd be most welcome.
John Michael Talbot, it's been a real joy, an honor, and a blessing to be able to talk with you today, and we wish you continued blessings with your work.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
And you're a joy to talk to. I hope I didn't gab too much.
No, you're great. All right. Thanks. God bless.
God bless you.